Now it's time for us to listen to an interesting talk, which is a very topical to the festival theme, a forum entitled Digital Learning Transformation and Challenges, Impacts on Students' Mental Health. For this session, we will have three amazing speakers who are Mrs. Alexius Chiang from IMU Psychology Department, Mr. Chua Kiman from Unimas, and Mr. Muhammad Anik Halim, who is currently one of our IMU's medical students at the clinical school. This session will be moderated by Dr. Nurul Hidayah from IMU Center for Education. Now, I am pleased to invite Dr. Nurul to begin the session.
Thank you, Madam MC. So once again, International Learning Resources Festival 2021 welcomes everyone to the Forum on Digital Learning Transformation and Challenges, Impacts on Students' Mental Health, a pertinent topic of discussion taking into consideration digitized and virtualized learning experience that is required of students. So I am Nurul from IMU Center for Education, the moderator for today's forum. We are joined by three esteemed speakers, Mr. Alexius Chiang from IMU, Mr. Chua Kiman from Unimas, and Mr. Muhammad Anik Halim, IMU medical student. So before we get into the discussion, allow me to briefly introduce each speaker. Mr. Alexius Chiang worked at the the Children Association, raising awareness in protecting children from sexual abuse as the assistant director. He then worked as a sports psychology consultant at the National Sports Institute, working with elite athletes in the national badminton and shooting teams, where he later became the head of the Sports Psychology Center. So he is currently with us working at IMU Psychology Department. The next speaker, Mr. Chua Kiman, is a senior lecturer at the Faculty of Language and Communication, majoring in educational technology, computational linguistics, and instructional design. He has won several awards at national and international levels for various innovations in teaching and learning, as well as assistive technology. He was also the recipient of Unimas Academic Award for the Teaching Award category in 2014, as well as the Best E-Learning Facilitator at International University E-Learning Carnival 2016. Our last speaker, Muhammad Anik, is currently an IMU student in medical course. He was awarded with Ibnu Sina Award by Head of Minister of Terengganu in 2015, and one of the active members of United Nations Youth Malaysia, seeking to be one of the organizing committee of Talent Bank's Inter-Campus Career Fair. So enthused more about people and passionate in reading and researching as reason for him to further his studies in medical course, and he's also one of the JPA scholars holder. So the speakers will be invited to present first, and after all the presentation, we will open the discussion to the audience. But in the meantime, if audience would like to pose questions, it can be posted in the chat box and will be attended to during the discussion. So without further ado, I invite first Mr. Alexius Chiang to present his presentation. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you, Dr. Nurul. Okay, allow me to share my screen. All right, can you see?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. All right, so let me begin. So the topic is very pertinent for today, as being a lecturer in a private university, as well as understanding the challenges. I'm also a father with two kids, one in primary school and one in secondary school, you know, and there's lots of real life experiences of what the effects are on our learners, right? Be it whether they're very young all the way to university level. So I'm going to talk about the effectiveness of what the research has shown in terms of online learning during the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as some lessons learned here. So obviously, we are very well aware that although the world is starting to open up to the like schools, for example, in Malaysia starting next week, nevertheless, worldwide, more than 1.2 billion children in 186 countries were affected by school closures in various forms. Either they have been open and then with the spike in cases, then they're closed again. And in addition to that, there are many places where it's unstable in terms of the transition to online learning because due to the lack of connectivity, lack of devices, as well as the expertise to actually teach effectively in such a situation. So by looking at this situation here, right, when we look at the effectiveness, particularly in Malaysia, so this is very, very recent, and I would like to, although I don't have the full results of the study, this is what was published. Nevertheless, let's dive into the meaning of things. So, for example, just recently, 51.2% of about 52,413 students who took part in the PDPR or home-based teaching and learning program said they were stressed out. And this was the headline that was showcased across many newspapers. Over 50% of our school children were stressed out. So, and this was done in 2020 by the Malaysian Education Ministry. So let's keep that in mind, okay? So what were the reasons established in regards to why they were stressed out? So students surveyed blamed their stress on limited interaction with their teachers and classmates. And this can be understood by them being face to face previously and suddenly having to move online, which initially it was a fun thing, it was a great thing, the flexibility was there. But when it's prolonged, that was when the problem started to come about, right? The types of interaction that is done primarily online is limited by its very nature, although the communication and connection can be there. So in regards to that, some also were stressed due to the lack of guidance they received during classes. The way I interpret this is that the teachers themselves had to adjust to the use of technology. And so they had to transition rather than just use the medium of online teaching as just a way to just teach per normal. We actually had to adapt to the nuances as well as the pros and cons and the strengths and limitations in regards to online learning. So this was also a learning process for the teachers alike. In addition to that, the study found that PDPR was found to be average. And so what does average here mean? It shows that 34.1% of students stated they learned a lot more in school. So obviously they were more used to it. But I would also dare to say that it depends a lot on the type of subject, where it's more hands-on, let's say it's more lab-based and therefore hands-on if in school would be definitely more effective. Okay, in regards to this as well, about 50% of the students said they enjoyed the program. Again, a lot of flexibilities. There are also lots of advantages to teaching and learning online. Whereas 57.5% said they were able to complete their assignments on time. Now, even though this, in a sense, is the majority, my concern is what about the other 42.5% who are not able to complete their assignments on time? So obviously, there are some limitations here as well. Now, in regards to university students, this is also a very interesting statement. 78.4% of students surveyed were not stressed out by online lessons. Okay, so the keyword. So I'm actually looking forward to the third speaker and giving his perspective in regards to if students were actually stressed out or not in this sense. Having said that, being not stressed out doesn't in any shape or means show that there is an ideal learning environment being portrayed. So being not stressed out doesn't necessarily indicate effectiveness. So when we do a quick search across the world in terms of studies that have been done for university students, a study in public in Malaysia, public university in Malaysia found that students' readiness had a moderate influence on the effectiveness of online learning. So students' readiness here is the preparation, the mental fortitude, the ability, the hardware, the software to be prepared for such a transition. And obviously we're all caught, but obviously if you had some sort of familiarity learning online, then students were more ready. And in regards to a study in the US Dental School, on a survey of 482 pre-doctoral students, okay, I found that students perceive engagement with faculty and classmates predicted their perceived effectiveness as well. So this is the key that keeps coming up as well, the engagement. So we have to be aware that despite the ability of technology to help connect us, the engagement that we have or the quality of the engagement is by necessity missing to a certain degree. Obviously, it's going to be different, and this will carry on even in the near future in some shape or form. So we need to be mindful that engagement in terms of connection is not the same as interaction and, so to say, the face-to-face perspectives of things. Now, in Jordan, when they did research on university students, they found that faculty and students indicated that online learning challenges were basically, again, lack of interaction and therefore also motivation. It kind of led to this after a while because the onus on learning was put primarily onto the students themselves. So they could either be attending classes at the scheduled time or not, because usually the lessons were recorded. They could actually do assignments later, okay, because there's a lot of flexibility in how we could actually leverage on the technologies. So there were also technical and internet issues, data privacy and security as well. So again, it's not such a straightforward perspective that technology is the answer, although technology was definitely a savior in regards to at least we had some form of learning. And I'm going to showcase there's also a lot of effective learning that did take place during this time. So even though online learning was a viable alternative, the survey respondents here said that it could not substitute for face-to-face learning. And the study recommended that blended learning would be an option, viable option moving forward. So let's look at the advantages, because there are distinct advantages in terms of online learning. So according to the World Economic Forum, some research shows that on average, students actually retain more knowledge and more material. In fact, about 25 to 60% more when learning online compared to only 8 to 10% in a classroom, due to be able to, and this is the advantage here, being able to learn faster online by requiring less time. And how does that happen? It happens because students can learn at their own pace. If they already find that they already know the material, then they can forward it. They can jump to the sections that they need to focus on and do further reading or further assignments on that and skip the other sections. Whereas in a traditional classroom environment, everybody has to go at the pace that is set and dedicated by the teacher, which means that some students who are ahead can kind of feel bored, whereas some students who are behind, they may still not be able to catch up accordingly as well. So there is a discrepancy, whereas the opportunity to, in a sense, personalize one's learning by having online resources available, students can then choose and select what is appropriate for them accordingly. Nevertheless, that seems to work well for older children. For younger children, in younger students, a structured environment is required because they tend to be more easily distracted. Now, again, I'm going to share with you my own perspectives when I see my own kids. Okay, so since studies also have shown that children extensively use their senses as they are developing in the developmental stages, the use of their fine senses is key. So having a student, a young child, sit in front of a computer for about 4 to 5 to 6 hours, with, although there are breaks in between, nevertheless, it doesn't engage them physically. Okay, they may be hearing, they may be seeing, but are they understanding? So there's a lot of other factors that do come into play when other senses are not fully engaged. So in addition to that, the recommendation also is to make learning fun. Okay, so I'll again share my experience just after this as well as effective through the use of technology. So what's also recommended, and this is also true, if we can somehow gamify or integrate games within the learning context to demonstrate higher engagement as well as increased motivation towards learning, especially among younger students. All right, so sounds great. How does it apply in practice though? So as I mentioned, I have a high schooler and I have a kid in primary school. So I asked actually, because the teachers like to use Kahoot as an example, right? So Kahoot is a game, it's an online environment where questions are posted and see who can answer correctly in the fastest amount of time. And when I asked my youngest child, what was her experience like playing Kahoot in an educational environment, she was very blunt and she said to me, it's stressful. And then I said, why? Because, there's limited amount of time. And then I say, but, how do you find like the ranking system, right? She said that she's trying to beat somebody else. That's her motivation. Now, obviously, my kid is not representative of all, but that also gives an insight about how we may see it from a different angle, or we may not necessarily fully understand that even though kids are engaged in the educational session, what is the psychological process that they are experiencing at that time, because that would set the tone for how they approach additional learning environments, even with amazing technologies, updated perspectives put into place. Do we fully understand the perspective of the learner rather than from the implementation of technology and from the teacher and lecturer's perspective? All right, so there was a really good study done across Asia, and this really provided a lot of additional insights, because it's not just about one country or one university, but across 12 markets in Asia Pacific. This was done relatively recently in May 2021, and it involved about 3,400 students, parents, as well as educators. So all 360 degrees perspective in regards to online learning. So in Malaysia, we had about 366 respondents. And what was found is the biggest barriers to success in online learning is found to be low use of available solutions and social challenges stemming from extended periods of remote learning. So in terms of low use of available solutions, is that what it's saying is that we are actually not maximizing the platforms that we are currently having. We are not actually maximizing the apps and the software that's there. We're kind of like just skimming the surface and doing the bare minimum necessary, because we're not fully leveraging on what these technologies can do. And in this sense, I would look at not just from the student perspective, but from the teachers and lecturers perspective as well, because we need to be really savvy and have this clear educational mindset to understand what we are trying to achieve by implementing technology, because we have to be aware not to implement technology for the sake of implementing technology. In regards to that, there's also social challenges involved, right? As was mentioned about long periods of remote learning. So initially when it started, everybody embraced this, everybody's kind of feeling the way around how things were going, and it worked. We got to the point where it worked, it was kind of fun, but after that, without the engagement, true engagement with their lecturers, with the teachers, and with the classmates, and the responsibility and the onus being put primarily onto the learner in the sense, then things kind of shifted along the way. Now, this also shows a big contrast in terms of where the gap may be, where the educators were actually improving as they taught more and more online. And 66% of educators thought that their teaching performance had improved. Well, about 19% believe it had maintained, but on overall, a large majority thought they got better. However, for the students though, when you take it in contrast to what the lecturers themselves taught, for students, 42% believe their performance had improved, 25% believe it had stayed the same, and this is where I have a lot of concerns. 33% believe their learning performance had declined. So if we just take on average, 1 in 3 students, their learning, their whole education perspective has declined in some shape or form. That is very, very worrying. Despite the unveiling and the utilization of really good technologies that cut across the barriers and reach out to people, there is still a gap. So what were the gaps though? Okay, having said that, before I get into that, there's still a lot of effectiveness that we need to acknowledge as well. So for example, accessibility and flexibility, the two key areas. You can't travel, but you can do things online. As we are in this forum right now, we are actually doing this online. So you don't have to come to IMU campus as an example. So that's great, right? So these are the major advantages of online learning, including the ability, and this is the key, to access a broad variety of content and materials from all over the world. We don't have to go to a library anymore. The world is our library. The world is our oyster of information. That's great, at the tip of our fingertips. Okay, so in addition to that, educators were also interested in education-specific security. And this is something that we need to also talk about. Of course, the security primarily when Zoom was the main primary platform initially, and there were attacks, as you may have remembered, where classes were taught and strangers would come in and do stuff, right? Not education specific as an example. So security was tightened, which is good. Data privacy, because we're all online, there's a certain amount of information that we need to give off, so we have to take care of that. But the key good points here, collaboration features. Okay, collaboration features, like even in between the talks just now, you could write your comments on the Padlet feature. So that's great. You can collaborate and see not only what you thought, but what others think as well. Student assessment tools have gone online as well as the general ease of use and accessibility features, primarily for those who are disabled in some shape or form. They could utilize and leverage on technology to also gain an equal amount of access. All right, so let's talk about the barriers and where it leads to in terms of the mental health challenges along the way. So both students and educators found the biggest barrier to online learning is the environment. Suddenly, we all had to stay home, right? And for many of us, that is still the case. Having said that, is the home the ideal situation if it is not set up accordingly? So many people who stay in the cities have smaller homes with fewer rooms. But yet, by going online, not just the students, but also their parents had to go on online meetings, had to have the work done online where they needed privacy, confidentiality, but also that ideal situation, ideally, if they could, to have that kind of focus and attention to be given without the distractions. But living in a small, cramped household is not ideal in any shape or form, despite the best equipment that money can buy. So the top 4 factors listed as challenges by students and parents were both distractions at home. So obviously, you got to stop and make lunch. You got to wash the clothes, right? You got to clean up. You got to clean the floor. Regular daily life happens as well as it should be. Depending on how many people stay in the household as well, then everybody would need to use the common spaces together as well. So I saw a family as an example using like 3 generations using the dining table as an example, right? All on their laptops or their tablets, doing whatever they're trying to do, but all together, but yet apart in that sense as well. So that has also changed the dynamics of the family environment. There's also less motivation to attend classes at home because of one of the key things is the lack of accountability. Despite the engagement that teachers and lecturers try to incorporate within their teaching materials, it's still left to the student to take advantage and actually engage and utilize these perspectives, these technologies at their disposal. But for many, I even heard many students actually saying that when they attend classes, they just switch it on and then they go about their daily work, or they actually just lie down on bed. And once we hit our head on the bed, that is a dangerous thing because our perspective and the connection is about sleeping and resting and not about learning. In addition to that, there's also lack of immediate feedback and interaction with teachers and classmates. And this is one of the key things. Although technology can surpass and actually join and bring people together, nevertheless, when talking about feedback, not just as a group feedback, but individualized feedback, because I've also noticed that many students are very shy to post their comments or feedback or ask questions, similar like in face-to-face classrooms. But one of the key things that I was not aware of, because some of the my own students told me this, they miss the opportunity for after class is over, as the lecturer walks out, that they could then, rather than ask questions in class, they could then approach the lecturer personally and have a further clarification and conversation about the concept being taught. But when they felt that when it was online, right, once the class was over, there was an opportunity to follow up with the lecturer after that. So that's a very minor, but in a sense, major outcome of this slight change as well. In addition to that, social isolation or difficulty in meeting people was one of the key things as well, since we all, at a very long period of time, especially for MCO 3.0, we were all isolated within our home spaces. And for many of the students who were not staying with family members or other housemates, they were really, really not just having to deal with the educational aspects, but about their own mental health aspects. One of the things we discovered was that the moment MCO 3.0, at least in Malaysia, when it hit, the local students went back home to their hometowns. But the apartments where they shared with the international students, the international students were left alone because they could not fly in or nor out to leave the country to go back to their home country as well. So suddenly they were left all alone. So they didn't have the interaction of the other housemates as well. Now, in addition to that, while video conferencing applications provide many avenues for real-time interaction as well, attending all the classes through a screen proved definitely to be challenging for students. And 89% of educators listed students get distracted or lose concentration during live sessions. Is one of the major barriers. So again, this is understandable, as the thing is, when the onus of learning falls primarily onto the individual, the learner, whereas compared to a class-based environment from before, where we all were accountable to each other as we could see each other and see what others did as well. All right, so setting the groundwork for further discussion, right, after this, I would like also to take an opportunity to give some recommendations based on whatever I presented so far. So for example, moving forward, right, for teachers as well as lecturers, we need to focus on creating collaborative teaching and learning opportunities, whereby we really want to engage as well as assess if the students truly understand, not just necessarily by just asking them MCQ questions, but following through and having opportunities for engagement so that the students can actually ask in a free way, not necessarily in a large classroom environment. Okay, and among assignments as well, get students to actually interact with one another so that they don't feel alone, and that's something that we tried very hard to do as well. In addition to that, provide clear instructions and address student concerns and expectations about teaching, learning, and assessment activities. Sometimes lecturers or teachers themselves, ourselves, we are asked to implement a particular technology, but we are not too clear about it, meaning that the technology looks cool, but what is the educational perspective? What is the point about utilizing such a tool, and when and how should we use it, rather than just use it for the sake of using it? So we have to be very, very careful and clear about it, because if we are unclear about giving instructions to our students, then students themselves will not necessarily see the point and just look at it as some gimmick that they have to partake in. Include knowledge checks periodically throughout all teaching and learning activities to assess student understanding as well as engagement. Many lecturers as well as teachers like to complete their teaching or their topics within the allocated time, which is good. But we also need to stop every few minutes at key points throughout the lecture or the teaching activity to check into the students' understanding, so that when students engage with us and they actually ask questions, then we realize, whoa, okay, there's certain parts they don't quite understand. Let me repeat that. Let me try to rephrase that. But that also brings engagement. And what I like to do is I actually ask other students to provide the answers rather than from me directly, so that other students who may have an insight into the concept can also share their perspectives, and therefore we can learn together. In addition to that, we also can have elements of blended learning moving forward. So leverage on online learning strengths. Obviously, there is a lot of strengths, so we need to recognize that. For example, when learning core material, but also try, again, moving forward, to incorporate as many face-to-face activities as is appropriate to enhance the learning environment. In addition to that, to provide resources and support to manage and build mental health resiliency. So one of the key things is that we need to talk about mental health, and it's what we're doing right now, but also to, how should I put this, talk about things not just in terms of the content of education, the concepts as well as topics, but incorporate more mental health, building up of the resources for the students in regards to, for example, life skills, or even teaching them relaxation techniques. So these are some things, if we can teach these kinds of things and make it a normalized perspective within our educational setting, then students can learn and recognize when something happens to them, they have the skills to apply to themselves. In addition, structure varied activities and incorporate gamification elements, especially for younger children. But also have a feedback loop to check back that is it the implementation of the technology, is it appropriate and according to what we plan and not being misinterpreted or understood differently by the children themselves, particularly younger children. Also, ideally, if at home, try to create dedicated personal spaces for teaching and learning whenever possible. And I know it's not necessarily so, because again, the spaces have not changed. We cannot just go and buy a new house or stuff like that. But understanding that this is a priority and having family discussions upon appropriate allocation of spaces, right? As well as what is necessary and what's needed for each person to do their job accordingly, that would actually reduce a lot of tensions in the household. And lastly, to encourage love of learning through activities and projects. And I think this is very important as well, which are not necessarily academically inclined, but instead emphasizing on personal development. I think many of us focus too much on using the carrot and stick approach, and then getting students to try to work hard or achieve something and then giving them a grade on it. But true learning happens when the knowledge gain is actually embedded within one individual, and then it changes them moving forward in life. And that is what true learning is, what we want to see, but also learning across the lifespan. So emphasizing a lot on growth, personal development, and this is where we can actually build in mental health discussions as well, like building resiliency and relaxation techniques can actually help students to understand that they are not alone, that these are opportunities where they can engage with others, not just on the topics being taught, but also on life itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex, for such an insightful presentation to kickstart our discussion on the challenges of mental health based on the digital transformation on students. So now I would like to invite Mr. Chua to provide his views and opinions on the topic. Mr. Chua, the virtual floor is yours. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Norul, and also Mr. Alicius for a very, very in-depth sharing of all the stats and all the research done on the online learning and virtual learning with regards to the pandemic. So I will cut short a bit because the focus for today will be on the well-being. So I'm going to share based on my experience dealing with teachers and also students across different levels of education, from kindergarten until higher education. So I don't really have a lengthy slide deck, so I'll just share some keywords for all of you. All right, hope it's there. So I'm gonna start off with this picture. This is my student, Chirapon. She's based in Kedah, one of the remote area in Kedah where the internet connection is not so good, and well, not so good during early stages of MCO during the pandemic, March last year onwards, and she was struggling to kind of submit a lot of assignment given to her. At that time, of course, she was back home for the midterm break, and little did she realize that she's going to start there for quite some time. And no, I mean, she graduated, but one thing I like about her was she's the perfect showcase of that tagline of if it matters to you, you'll always find a way. What happened was she was told to submit a lot of assignment, of course, during that time because it was halfway through the semester. But then, of course, a lot of lecturers actually made adjustment to the kind of assignment that they need to submit. All the materials, all the resources were then converted to digital format and all that. Now, in my case, of course, I didn't force her to kind of follow the classes. The synchronous classes was very minimal, were very minimal. I focused more on the asynchronous task, but there was one task that I think she diligently submitted without fail, is the 1 minute of speaking, because this is an English course, and she was told to kind of submit a 60-second video of whatever she wanted to say every single day, and she submitted without fail. What happened was her father was a rubber tapper, and she would follow the father to one area in the rubber estate where the connection was, is better, and she would spend about like, you know, maybe 20 to 30 minutes just to submit that task, and not only my task, for other tasks as well. And she would also download the materials given to her through the platform that we have at my university. So when I asked her about her experience, obviously, if you put her in that situation, she would tell you very stressful, right? Had to wake up so early, go to the estate just to submit assignment, and then come back home, study without really a conducive environment at home, no spaces, no proper spaces for study. She had to help the mother as well and all that. If you take a look at the whole picture, of course, it's going to be very stressful to a lot of people, including herself. But the rating given by her for the whole experience, for the whole semester, was very high. She rated the course, most of the courses very high. She performed better in a way based on the situation. So what I'm trying to tell you here is the pandemic somehow creates a very false impression of online learning, I would say. Suddenly, we are very concerned about comparing apple to oranges. Suddenly, we are comparing face-to-face and online learning, when in fact, we know that we shouldn't be comparing face-to-face and online learning. We should be looking at how we can optimize both and take a stand on the blended learning or hybrid learning approach, which we have been preparing since 2015. Later on, I'll just show you a quick glance of what the Council of E-Learning has prepared for so many years. We have been preparing for blended learning or hybrid learning since 2014 based on the e-learning policy that we have. This is why a lot of universities across Malaysia has been told to convert a lot of content to online mode since, you know, a decade ago, actually. It's something that we cannot even, you know, question, because if you look at IMU itself, you have a lot of e-learning resources. You have converted a lot of teaching into online mode in preparation for not just for the pandemic, but for the future, where hybrid learning will be the way where we make use of the beauty or you know, the accommodation of all this virtual learning into the face-to-face mode, or I would rather call it in person, because if you're doing virtually, it's also face-to-face. In fact, it's closer virtually than in the actual setting. So, but I would like to highlight three things only in my sharing today, because in connection to well-being, what I noticed was there's always this issue of connection, right? And Mr. Alex pointed very well in terms of the connectivity issue that a lot of students are complaining, and also the educators as well. I do a lot of training because I was heading the e-learning unit. I was the deputy director for teaching excellence as well at my university. And when I was handling last year, I was given the task to kind of lead the transition from the in-person teaching to online learning and all that. But at the same time, I was also tasked by the state through the state education department to help teachers, because we have to accept the fact that not all teachers are prepared for this. And sometimes we are being a bit unfair to kind of like expect teachers to do wonders with technologies within a short time. I think now, if you compare the teacher that you are looking at a year ago and now, something has changed a bit in the way they view technology. So I think that's progress. But of course, to a lot of people, the progress is slow, and they may not accept the fact that things have gone better. They would still say that things have worsened and all that. But to me, if you look at the holistic picture of whatever is going on now, teachers are more having greater acceptance to technology. They are more open to using tools to help and to mitigate the issue. Now that they are reopening the schools, you can see how they try to make use of existing technology to also help those who cannot attend school. But the connection here, I would say the larger one, has some of the stats have been shared by Mr. Alex, was peers and lectures. What I noticed was, when students complain about virtual learning or online learning, if you go deep into this issue, if you actually sit down with them and talk to them, which I do a lot of, you know, in a lot of sessions, not to my student, to other people's students, because I tend to do this class hijacking as well. I would attend a lot of classes just to you know, of my colleagues or even teachers. They would ask me to go to their classroom and, you know, kind of like sit in and watch what happened and all that. If you notice, a lot of students actually, they don't really care about what you're teaching. They want to get the attention of their peers. And of course, once they couldn't get attention of peers, they would direct it to the lectures. All they need is just a connection between, you know, that like the kind of connection that we have in class. They don't really care whether, you know, how effective you are in teaching, unless they get that kind of connection. Like this, put it simply, why would a student attend your class virtually with very active engagement, But then later on, when they attend another class, they just switch it off. They just sleep over the whole 2-3 hours because they don't connect with the lecturer or the peers within that group or within that class. So you can see how this kind of changes the behavior of the students. I mean, students who are here can correct me. They get connected to the lecturers and the peers more than the content, because the content wise, they can always get it from elsewhere if they really, really need help. Or maybe if they really would like to study the topic, they would always Google YouTube. There's so many resources now. They can learn better using other sources than referring to our own content. Sometimes our content are even lousier than whatever is available on TikTok, for example. There's so many micro-learning activities or micro-learning materials on TikTok itself that you can learn within 60 seconds or even 90 seconds compared to a 1 or 2 hour lecture. But what I'm telling you here is the fact that if you go deeper and ask the student, when it comes to engagement, they will say they want that kind of connection. That's why they want to go back to campus. They really want to go back to campus because that is where they get to talk to their peers, having fun, making jokes around them, and then that kind of connection which is missing in the virtual environment. I wouldn't say totally missing. It's just that it doesn't feel right when you make a joke online, because the buffering and all that will kind of make your joke lousy and they don't laugh, that kind of situation. So I think this one we have to be very, very clear. It's not just the connection of the internet, but also the peers and the lecturers. So also another issue of concentration. I think this was also brought up earlier by Mr. Alex, just about the spaces at home, right? Last time when you put everyone in the class, or when they come to campus in the class, you kind of can control whatever is happening, right? Even though you cannot really, really confirm all of you or all of them are actually concentrating. Right now, if I'm talking, I'm not sure whether you're concentrating or not. Even in the class, it's the same case. I was telling the teachers, now you're complaining about students not concentrating on your virtual classes, but are you confirming that in the in-person or face-to-face classes, you can guarantee they are concentrating? They could be thinking about something else as well. It's just that because it's virtual and you're looking at them face to face now, very close to the monitor, you kind of feel like they are not concentrating. When in the class, they could be sitting at the back, or they could be sitting in their own position in front, but they're thinking about something else. So I think this, again, going back to comparing apple and oranges kind of situation, where suddenly everyone is so concerned about all this engagement, participation when it's virtual, when in fact, in the in-person situation, nobody really cares about it. Right? Right now, suddenly when it's online, everyone starts to say, we need to care about engagement, we need to care about participation and all that. When it was in person, you can go on and on with a slide for 3 hours. Nobody bothers to take on your engagement. I mean, I'm not saying you, but in general, when I spoke to teachers and lecturers as a whole, during my session and all that. But signs are there. We can see now. I really, really like when pandemic strike in a way, because it kind of changes the landscape of how we view learning and teaching. More teachers and more educators are concerned about engagement. More of them are starting to relook at their pedagogical and implementation. Before this, perhaps they don't even bother because things seems to be working well. Another issue would be money. A lot of studies have shown, even my own study has shown, that financial situation is causing a lot of concern about the well-being of the students. Actually, a lot of students are working part-time during all this, food delivery and all that, including my student. There was one student, doing food delivery during my class, delivering food while listening to my lecture, and you can see the thing and all that. So these are the things that I think sometimes we overlook, but really need some focus on the kind of situation that we are looking at. But again, I think this was done like earlier, but now if you see the trend, things are getting better. Now that we are reopening a lot of campuses and schools, things could be better. All right. Issue number 3, contraction. And just to wrap it up, contraction is our mindset. I think what happened was, during this pandemic, somehow we contract our mind into the mindset that online learning is going to replace everything. No, I think all this while we never think about virtual learning going to replace online learning. We see the potential of virtual learning, we see the potential of online learning, but to me, I would prefer hybrid learning to be the champion rather than trying to replace the total experience of physical engagement and also the in-person teaching. Like for example, in medical field, how can you learn everything online, right? Because you still need to feel that situation where you handle patient in different situation, when you get this kind of vibe from your all these expert or specialists and all that. It's different compared to online. Also, there's a contraction of outlook. Somehow we shorten our outlook. We don't see this as a mitigation plan. We see this as a plan to kind of kill in-person teaching or to kill in-person learning. To me, we have to don't contract ourselves, just widen our outlook again, see this as a potential ground to relook at our pedagogy, re-examine the way we conduct online learning and see how we can complement the in-person teaching. And of course, don't contract in terms of development. There's so many trainings, so many webinars being conducted from last year until now. If you notice, not many actually learn a lot from the whole process, despite all these webinars. If you ask yourself, maybe if there are a few things that you have learned through the webinar, maybe it's less than 10 if you will list out. And it's even more worse for students. A lot of us focus on the educators, focus on teachers, but we forgot about learners. Are they trained to be self-regulated learners? Are they trained to be monitoring their own learning? Are they trained to monitor their own well-being? I think this is something lacking in our current development. So I think we need to widen up, and just to explain what I'm trying to tell you just now with regards to this thing. If you take a look at our blueprint of e-learning, we have started in 2014 just to start off with the first phase. If you notice here, we need to have staff with the TPAC knowledge and all these skills and all that. But if you look at the phase that we are in now, just right before the pandemic, we're supposed to have 100% staff with TPAC knowledge. If you have not heard of TPAC, which is this one, we talk about technological knowledge, content knowledge, and pedagogical knowledge. A lot of lectures have this too, but they lack this one. And there's also the need to integrate all three. But if you notice at the planning, by right now, right, during this phase, we are going to aim for 100% staff. But I think even within institution itself, I can guarantee you it's less than 30%. I mean, maybe less than 30 actually have heard of this thing and all that.
Mr. Chua, sorry to interrupt. We couldn't see, we are still
seeing
the issue. Yeah.
I think I shared the wrong screen. Okay, now you should be able to see it. Can you see it? Yeah, TPAC. Can you see it?
Yes, yes, now.
Yeah. So this is the Dasar E-Pembelajaran Negara or e-learning policy that we have set. That's why I always say our Ministry of Higher Education and the Ministry of Education, if you take a look at the blueprint itself and all that, we are always well prepared. We are ahead of time. If you ask a lot of countries in the world, they would always fall back to Malaysia when it comes to this kind of implementation. But when it comes to implementation part, we are always lacking. In terms of planning and setting up the blueprint, we are there. I mean, we have foreseen this for so many years, a decade ahead of time. And you can see, like I said here, 100%, right? This is the TPAC. I'm sure a lot of you have never seen this before, right? But if you look at the aim, we should be aiming at 100. So these are the things that I think the challenges that we're facing. We are all this ready for all these kind of changes and all that. But when it comes to implementation, there's so many things to take a look at. And my survey on the 24,000, this is 24,000 students on the, not student actually, teachers in Sarawak. We surveyed, and a lot of them actually have problem. This is the paper, but a lot of them actually have problem with the connection, right? As we mentioned. But when it comes to the connection, let's say I told them, if I give you perfect connection, 4G or whatever you want it, let's say I give you everything, would you be able to carry out online? A lot of them actually say no. It means the connection and the mode is not just the main problem. The problem is still this too, the pedagogical knowledge and also technological knowledge, where they have to have this TPK, right? They may have the connection, but they do not know how to carry it out. All right, so I think that's all from me, because we would love to listen from the student itself. Okay, thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chua. Yeah, thank you so much, for the again an insightful presentation. So having listened to two faculty's view, we now invite our student, Muhammad Anik, to share his views from the student's perspective. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Everyone can listen to my voice, right?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so thank you, iLRF, for another, second opportunity. I was a speaker before during LRF Festival 2019, and I still remember during that time I was talking about the implementation of iLRF 4.0. So there's one professor from University Science Malaysia She was such a great person. Talking about the implementation are very important for us, especially among teachers, lecturers, okay? Because we need to see the importance of the technological, as mentioned by Mr. Chua, uh, regarding about the pedagogical, sorry, the TPAC blueprint from the higher ministry. So during that time, I remember that I said, Malaysia need to be prepared if we need to implementation the IR 4.0, especially in the fields of medicine, okay? Because we need to make sure that people who learners, I mean learners in the medicine field, should understand that one day they maybe cannot go to the hospital anymore. Man, one day they need to know that they cannot see a real patient anymore. They need to see a virtual patient in the future. So for that being said, for the past 2 years, right now we are sitting in a pandemic, and now everything has changed. I can see it's abrupt changes to us as a learners, especially because and to the lecturers also. So when abrupt changes take place, it's very hectic. Everything is going off, and preparation, as mentioned by Mr. Chua, we are planning. However, in terms of implementation, it's not that good. As you know, the quote saying, actions speak louder than words. So we can see how Malaysian especially taking their own steps in integrating everything in terms of online learning and those so-called what we call IR 4.0 in their life. So for student perspective, I specifically feeling that to have online learning in this setting, especially in pandemic, are really helpful and helping, accessing matters, accessing books and journals during studies. Okay, everywhere you can go to Starbucks, you can go to any place that you feel comfortable. You can study any time that you want in the day. However, when it comes to lectures, as mentioned Mr. Shua, how you want to confirm that particular student are actually really focusing. Even if you go to the physical class, the student are still not focusing in the class. So how we need to make sure that particular student, when the online class learning, are really focusing. So I like the idea. I can say that the truth is told here by Mr. Chua, but that is actually the reality of what happened now. Even if we do hybrid, we'll see if we do hybrid, most of the student, the reality is they just want to meet their peers, mingle with them and then talk with them. Are they really concerned about their study for now? Okay, for now, I don't see that there are no student at all out there actually concerned about their study. They are really concerned, but most of the students nowadays are actually, okay, at least I can just go to the school, meeting my friends, just do my assignment and then done, and that's all for that semester. So what they actually learn during that particular semester, are they really implement what they are really learn, or are they just absorb everything and then just keep it to themselves, and afterwards when they are actually working, go to the real world out there, so are able to implement what they actually learn in the schools, especially nowadays during pandemic, right? When we talk about online learning, I think both of speakers before me really give a good facts and data regarding about the advantage and the disadvantage, all regarding about the implementation of the online learning, what's the barriers that are being felt from both sides, learners and also lecturers. But what I want to highlight here is actually how do us feel as a learners when it comes to online learning. First of all, during the first pandemic, it's really stressful, definitely, in terms of connectivity, in terms of abrupt changes, And somehow, like, I still remember during that time, I was in early semester, and suddenly around second week or third week like that, and the government told us, to just go back home, and then there's no more physical learning and so on, so on. And during that time, it's really stressful because we still need to continue our study. However, the changes is there. It's like abrupt changes, and human, it's actually, take times to accept a change. Okay, let's say if you're in a relationship and then you want to, you break off and some more, and then so basically you need time to move on. So those actually apply in this kind of situation. Okay, so basically you see, as a learners, when there's abrupt changes and some more you are alone, and then there's no, during that time there's no support system, a very firm support system, I can say. So basically it's really make you feel like, downgrading yourself, really really, drain your energy as much as possible. Plus you have assignment need to do, you have a deadline need to meet, and so, and everything. So that is actually make us more stressful. And it's really funny to think about, in the terms of 1 year, how much change have been made by our government, and plus from specific in every university giving to their own you know uh, uh, learners, okay, their own lectures especially. So we need to, you know um understand each other's situation. Us as a learners understand the situation of the lecturers, and hope so lecturers understand the situation of the learner, because we can see nowadays, I'm talking about as a general, not just a university student. A lot of lectures, a lot of teachers, when they do online class learning, right, they give a lot of assignment. Every, let's say, one day have 5 class, online class, and each of the class, they want to give you assignment, and somehow the deadline is really near to each other. So basically, most of the student, they don't have much time to, like, that particular one day, they don't have much time to go to other place to relax themselves if they have, like stress, anxiety, this kind of stuff, depression. So in that situation happened for 5 days straight, and somehow they only have, the end of the week, Saturday and Sunday, and then Saturday and Sunday you need to, do your assignment. So basically, it's really drain your energy as a learner. Okay, so basically most of the students are concerned about this kind of thing, and they told their teachers, okay, they told their lecturers, they let them know about this kind of stuff. However, some of them, you know um I'm not blaming as a general, but however, like some of the lectures, some of the teachers are not concerned as much as what us concerned. Okay, it's like, okay, my job is done to teach you all. I already give you assignment. I just wait for the deadline. That's all. So the accessibility to internet and everything makes the lecturer thinks that these particular students are able to meet the deadline and make the assignment, more feasible, more great compared to physical classes. Okay, so the thing is, it's not, because it's abundant of work in the time, and at the same time, in the same period of time, you need to meet a multiple deadline. That's the things that we need to think of there. Interesting story or sharing that I want to share with you guys, everyone here. I had a meeting with the Ministry of Higher Education. Actually, I actively involved in organization known as the National. It's known in Malay, we call it a Majlis Perundingan Pelajar Kebangsaan. So it's a national representative, student representative councils from each university. So all the student leaders from others university, from Sabah, Sarawak, Borneo Island, okay, Peninsula, Malaysia. So we bring all the student leaders and we have a meeting with minister. So basically, our minister are really good. She really taking care of our our concerns, okay, and think a lot about us. We talk about this, and then she also help us in every aspect of matter, such as in terms of not just study matters, but however in terms of other stuff like when you doesn't get any enough foods in your universities, okay, that also actually give some sides of when you didn't get enough meals, okay, especially during pandemic, the first period of pandemic MCO in Malaysia. So that's actually give a serious problem to a student, because you cannot go out, you cannot buy foods, and then your university doesn't provide you any kind of meals for that particular day. So that thing is actually give another problems to the student, because and it's a depressed thing. So we talk all the small matters to ministers and those things. We also have a meeting with not just the Ministry of Higher Education, we have a Ministry of Multimedia and Communication regarding about the connectivities and those kind of stuff. And we also have a meeting with Prime Minister Office, PMO, talking about all sorts of matters that related to especially students and university students. So the engagement are really helpful for us, because we bring out all the matters that related to students' problems, to especially during pandemic, to highest to the government. So this is actually give us insight what actually government already done to us, especially the student. And sometimes there's a lot, there definitely a lot. However, the information that the student get, especially the university student, are really less. Sometimes not all the students know that actually they get this so-called bantuan. Okay, they didn't know that they actually can apply for free laptops, helping them. Okay, and especially what we are deeply concerned is actually our students in Borneo Island. Some of them doesn't know that they actually eligible to get help in terms of transportation, especially the aviation. So this is actually really concerned. The government did everything as much as they could. However, not most of the students know about this initiative. So I can say the online method is actually important for us to rely this so-called initiative to all the students out there. At least this matters, these small matters, when you want to go, let's say a Peninsula student study in UNIMAS or study in UMS, they want to take a flight there. And so at least this thing can help them to ease their thinking. Okay, doesn't need to think a lot regarding about their transportation, other stuff, so they can focus just one sole thing in their life, which is their own study. Okay, because we as a human, the more we age, the more we grown up, a lot of commitment that we need to think of, your life, your study, us as study. Okay, some of the lecture, their family, their what we call their work, their career. Okay, so do us as a learners, we think a lot too. Working a study, however other stuff also will impact if it's not being taken care. I think a lot of points have been out by Mr. Chua and Mr. Alicius regarding about those basic needs. I really like the point that Mr. Alicius bring up regarding about provide resources to support and manage the build of mental health. I think it's really important. If I'm mistaken, one of our students in IMU bring up NGO. That's actually a build of an NGO that actually talking about mental health specifically. It's really good. It's a good initiative among our students. It's really good. And I think we should teach a basic need for mental health in education, especially in education setting for all the students. At least when they're actually depressed, anxiety, or they feel anxious, alone, they know what to do. As someone who actually have a fever, they know what to take, a medication, right? However, mental health, you doesn't have specifically medication that actually you can take. So we need to teach maybe meditation steps like breathing or anything. As a Muslim, we have zikir and this kind. So that's why I think that's a very important thing to teach a student. And the point that bring up by Mr. Chua are really insightful. It's regarding about connection, concentration, and contraction. So the connection is regarding about, it's not just internet, however, the connection between your lectures, your peers, okay, and the concentration regarding about your family and money, and contraction regarding about your mindset, the outlook, and also development of the student. So I think we cannot blame, as a learner, we cannot blame the lectures, and the lectures cannot blame directly to the learners, because everything is sort of. So everyone is impacted during the pandemic, and we need to understand and be mindful with everyone jobs and everyone career. And respectfuls are very important to make sure that everything is going smooth, and to make sure that all of us enjoy during the learning process, enjoy the changes. And we need to understand that if you understand the thing is very important for you, you will definitely find a way to achieve that things. So I think that's all from me. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Hopefully can talk with you guys soon. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much, Anik, for sharing your perspective from a student's point of view. May I invite Mr. Alex and Mr. Chua to switch on their videos because we are starting the discussion. So I would like to invite audience to post or raise your hand for questions that you have for our speakers today. Yeah. Perhaps I can start off asking, all the speakers. We talk. I mean, I know the forum is very much focused on the students, yeah. But having listened through all the presentations and views, may I ask what would be your thoughts on the impact of the digital transformation on faculty, specifically, as Mr. Chua highlighted, some are actually progressing slower than the others. So, are we foreseeing a more psychological impact, I would say, in time to come, for faculty? Yeah, yeah. Anyone, yeah, would like to take the question? Yeah.
Okay, just real quick from me, being a lecturer myself, this is something I really need to emphasize, and actually Mr. Chua actually brought it up before. Previously in universities as lecturers, we're just supposed to lecture. One way, you listen, I'm done, bye-bye. But now, once we understand the dynamics, particularly online, it is about, do you understand, and how do we want to assess and check and then support after the lecture itself. So, but many lecturers still think, I'm a lecturer, I just lecture one way, done. Or how do I check? Bombard the students with assignment, as what Anik has said, to show evidence of attendance and participation. So we need to move away from this kind of perspective, and we can have like small checks as an example. But having said that, from the lecturer's point, I personally think that we have the right intention, but we don't have the right knowledge or implementation. Many times we are informed, hey, here's a new technology, or Teams has a new feature, or whatever. And then we're like, how do we use it? Why do we use it? For what purpose are we using it for? Right? And one thing that really irks me is, with all these new technologies in place, it comes and then it disappears. Or now it's discontinued. Or now it's been taken over by another company. And I'm like, wait a minute, I just got used to this. The students have just got used to this, and now it's not even there anymore. So for me, the way I move forward in this is that I take what is established, what is stable, and I make it work. If I do find certain other tools in place, I want to understand the pedagogy behind it, the reason for using it. Like, for example, I pity my kids when they do the Kahoot. You know, my child is stressed out of her mind. Her heart rate is beating. She's sweating because she's not number one, or she's dropping down right now. So the learning. So what is actually being taught here? The lesson being learned in the Kahoot, at least in what I observe from my kid, is this: you should already know all the information, and now it's just regurgitating in the fastest amount of time. That's not learning, that's memorizing. It's a different concept. So if we emphasize on these technologies without truly understanding its effects, what are we doing to the learners? So we have to be very aware of what are we trying to achieve by using the right technology at the right time for the right purpose, rather than for its sake in itself. Yeah, so we have to be understanding and learning ourselves why, and not just do. I'm going to stop here. I know
Yeah.
Mr.
All right.
Chua has a
Okay.
lot to say as well.
Thanks. Yeah. So yeah, this is sort of like a bridging a gap, between the faculty and also the situation mentioned by Anik. So before we go to Anik, because we have a question for you, yeah, Mr. Chua, would you like to share your view on
Just
that?
want to add, whatever
Yeah.
Mr. Alicia's mentioned was quite true. Just to share what we did in Unimas in helping the faculty members to kind of make that transition to online learning, or maybe fully online learning. I mean, they are aware of the blended learning before that. A clear mapping would be very, very nice. What we did was, instead of technological first, we will put the pedagogical first, the pedagogical strategies, whatever ideas. Then we put the technology at the side, meaning we map it. In a way, anytime when the tool is no longer available, you can replace it with another tool by updating the mapping. We have a very dynamic mapping that we had on our platform, where when you visit it, is constantly updated in a way, but the pedagogical stays. For example, in medical school, they love to use problem-based learning. So we will say, okay, problem-based learning, if you want to do trigger, this is how you do it, and then this is the tool. And then, if you want to do breakout rooms, instead of using the normal breakout room, there are also other alternative on doing breakout room, things like that. If you have that kind of clear mapping, faculty members can always fall back to that platform and then refer, and then come back to you when they need help with the tools. And I really like what Mr. Alicia mentioned about the tool, because now the smaller companies are being eaten up by all these bigger companies. So they, instead of acquiring it and maintain it, they just kill it off. You know what I mean? Because they just kill off their competitors. Like Kahoot now, if you notice, Kahoot is paid. A lot of teachers are paying for Kahoot because it's no longer totally free. If you want to have more, you have to pay. Sooner, I think more tools will be like that. More tools. Even Padlet itself used to be fully free. Now it's limited to 3, things like that. So I think sooner or later, you're going to have all these big companies like Microsoft, Google, and whatnot starting to take over, and then they just kill it off, or maybe they expand it. So, but a clear mapping would be nice. I mean, that's my take on this.
Yeah. Thank you for the suggestion, Mr. Chua. Really helpful, yeah, for our reference to actually help us as well as students. So we have a few more minutes left. So Anik, there is a question for you, yeah. How do you cope with the abrupt changes in your study? Perhaps 1 minute, yeah, about the coping strategies that you use to deal with the sudden change from face-to-face to online learning. Yeah.
Thank you, Miss Moderator. So the first thing that I do to coping with my abrupt changes in my study is actually your management in your time, especially. So doing learning, online learning, they already give you invitation, what time you can go, so on, right? So you have 24 hours per day, okay? So let's say if you have 8 hours just for study, you need to focus directly for study. Don't play phones, don't do other things, just focus on study. So the environment you build off, as mentioned, let's say that's me, I'm not sure. Okay, let's say you don't want to study at your house. Okay, so you plan a day before. So maybe you can go other places, like cafe, okay, other place. So when you plan your environment, you make sure that 8 hours definitely for your study, and then after that 8 hours you use direct for study. After that you stop studies. Don't say that if I don't study, then I don't be a good person. No, you already study 8 hours, definitely a really effective 8 hours. After that, another hours is just for you to relax, minding your other business. Okay, you done your best in your study, that's all. After that, you need to understand you have another stuff to do with your gods, with your parents, with your peers, okay, with your others lectures, maybe, okay, to mingle with other person. That's a very important management of time. The second one is actually you need to be mindful and be responsible. Yes, that's the most important thing. I, as a medical student, especially in the clinical, we need to we need to meet a lot of deadline, and they give us approximately for one posting is like around 6 weeks. So we have a lot of assignment, and then you need to make sure you need to be responsible by making, okay, let's say, and discipline. Let's say, okay, the second week you need to send this assignment. Okay, so then you need to make sure that in just 2 weeks your assignment is done. Okay, some of the students, they procrastinate, they doesn't have this so-called very firm discipline. Okay, so what happened is actually they procrastinate their work, they procrastinate those kind of stuff. At the end of the day, after 6 weeks, all the stuff actually become their burden. So although there's abrupt changes happen, take a deep breath, take a moment of silence, okay, and then understand the situation. If you don't follow the changes, you're gonna be left out. Definitely. So you need to follow the changes, follow the flow, but you should have a really, a great strategy, or else you definitely gonna, as mentioned by Mr. Shwa, be crushed off. Okay. So I think that's two things that are very important that make me survive till now. Okay, thank you so
All right,
much.
thank you so much, Anik. So it's all about time management, self-responsibility, and really planning to cope with the abrupt changes. So once again, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all our speakers as well as our audience for joining this forum. So hopefully it has enlightened us in different ways, and all of us can take different take-home messages to be applied, in our current situation. So thank you very much once again. So I'll hand over the session back to our Miss MC. Thank you so
All
much,
right,
everyone.
thank you. Thank you so much to all of our wonderful speakers and Dr. Noro for a very interesting and stimulating session. I am sure that that we all benefited from your sharing.